Hey guys, Tammy here, and in this video, we're going to talk about when it feels like you've lost in court. Now, I know this can be a really frustrating feeling, and a lot of people come out and they feel really angry or upset or whatever the case may be. And, I remember going into court many years ago with my late husband, Thomas, and we were sitting and observing while we were waiting for his case to be called. And one of the judges said, I'm encouraging all of you to go out into the hallway and try to negotiate with each other because half of you are going to lose. And that was really interesting. I'd never quite heard it put in that kind of framework where you have like a 50-50 chance. I mean, those aren't really fantastical odds, right? When we're going in, and yet sometimes those odds roll in our favor and sometimes they don't. So I'm going to dig into this topic a little bit more because a lot of times I find it can feel like a loss in the first instance, but then as time wears on, sometimes you realize that that judge was a lot wiser than you gave them credit for. Before we talk about this, let me just remind you, as always, if you like the content and find it helpful, don't forget to hit like on this video. If you are not yet subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. It really helps me, helps my content reach more people. It's a way of helping me and helping other people when you subscribe if you haven't done that yet. When we go in court in front of the judge, I think that we have a little bit of an all or nothing perspective. We kind of have this list in our head of the things that we're wanting and asking for. And sometimes we'll come back and maybe we got some of those things, but not all of those things. And I find that that really is the outcome most of the time. Usually some of it goes in our favor and some of it doesn't. One of the easiest ways to kind of demonstrate what I'm talking about is when we talk about child support. Now, I know I don't talk about support as much. There are formulas in every state for child support, and every state, it's a little bit different as far as how the calculation is done. So I don't really like to get into too much about specifics around it. But what I can tell you that I typically see judges do, I will use a real life example. Okay, my late husband, Thomas, which if most of you, I don't know if you'll know who he is or not. He passed away about a year and a half ago. And if you go far enough back on the channel, you'll see him. And because we started the channel together, he went into court with his ex-wife many, many years ago. Their children were very young, like 2 and 3 at the time. They went in over a support issue. They could not reach agreement, and also over the schooling issue for the oldest child, okay, who's now 21, but he was like 3, 4. I think he must have been 4 at the time because we were coming up on starting him in school. So his 2 little boys must have been 3 and 4 around the time this happened. And I think that the schooling part is a good lesson on kind of the long-term effects of decisions. And I think that the support issue is kind of an example of, how some things go in your favor and some things don't. So when the court was looking at the incomes of him and his ex-wife, one of the things his ex-wife said is like, she brought in all these job contacts and everything and said, well, he's an attorney. He could go work at these big high-powered law firms. He could make, $300,000 a year and all this stuff. And he's like, okay, well, first of all, I've never made that much. I've never worked in like a super, high powered firm. He was a managing partner in the firm he was in at the time, but had left there after the divorce to start our business, to start his own law firm. And so he was in the first year of that. And in the first year, as most people know, in a business, you don't make a lot of money, right? It's a lot of the building phase of it for the first 4 or 5 years or so. And so he came in and he said, well, Your Honor, I only made $30,000 last year. Like, that's all I made. I obviously am hoping that it's going to be more than that this year. I'm on the trajectory for that. And also over the long haul, I expect that this will produce more income for me than what my law firm job did, but it's going to take time to get there. Wife was arguing that he was capable of making, a few $100,000 a year. And he was saying, hey, I'm actually making 30. One of the things that he said in that is he gave a very child-focused argument on it. And he said, I can't be present for my kids half of the time the way I need to be. They're very young, and I can't work a full-time job at a law firm in, downtown in San Diego, where we live in one of the suburbs. I can't work a full-time job in downtown San Diego and still be able to parent half the time. I don't have that stay-at-home wife anymore, picking up that slack for me. And I want to be present as a father for my children. So I think that was another thing that he said that kind of influenced the way the judge made his decision. And with his ex-wife, he was saying like, look, she's got a massage therapy license. She's capable of earning, I don't remember what we had found jobs for. It was probably, 50, 60,000 a year, whatever it was. And, she was saying, well, I have these issues. I have, some health issues that cause me to not be able to perform that job anymore and all these different things. And Thomas was kind of like, well, there's no, doctor's note that says that or whatever. And so they made their arguments in front of the judge. And so what the judge did is he said, look, she's not earning any income presently, so I'm going to set her income at 0 for the child support calculation. And remember, this is 2-3 years post-divorce, right? So she has both parties always have a responsibility to support the children. At first, that was kind of like, oh my goodness, he's going to leave her set at 0. But then what he did is he turned and he said to Thomas, but I'm going to take you at your word and the documents you've produced that show that you made $30,000 last year. So we're going to set your income at $30,000 and we're going to set her income at 0. And then we're going to run a support calculation based on that. So the point of that is that the judge went on the lower end for both of them, right? Like he probably would not, what I don't usually see them do is something like set Thomas's income at that 200,000-300,000 that he's capable of theoretically, even though he's never earned that, and then set her at 0, where you have this big discrepancy. And by the same token, they probably wouldn't have set her at the 50, 60, whatever, and then set him only at the 30, right? Because that's the opposite flip of it, which would have resulted in her paying him. They usually will go, both on the upper end or both on the lower end when they're talking about the support issues, so that they're sort of cutting the cloth in the same direction, if that makes sense. It can feel like bad in some ways, but what the court is really trying to do, whether we're talking about custody or support or whatever, is they're trying to kind of divide things as equal as they can. I mean, unless we're talking about extreme situations that you hear me talk about, like physical abuse, alcoholism, drug addiction, somebody's incarcerated, those are more extreme cases where you see different outcomes that are more one-sided against that person that has those issues because there's safety concerns for the kids. But in a lot of ways, the court is trying to sort of be even-handed as much as they possibly can, whatever the situation is. So let me kind of talk about the school issue here real quickly so you can kind of understand what I mean about even though you lose in the moment, a lot of times over the course of time, you figure out that judge had a lot more wisdom about the issue than you did. When we went in, Thomas's ex-wife wanted to homeschool the oldest child. And Thomas didn't think that was a good idea. The child had some social development issues, and just Thomas felt like him being exposed to other kids and being around friends and things like that would help him develop his social skills a little bit more. And what mom said is, well, I think him being home for another year and be given the chance to mature a little bit would be better for him. And he was already 5.5 by the time kindergarten started. So he wasn't like on the younger end of it or anything. And we also had a therapist at that time who also agreed with mom that, hey, I do think it would probably be good if this child had another year to develop before we put him into the school system. This is where therapists come in, right? Because that opinion was very heavily weighted. The other thing that the judge said is he said, okay, mom's going to homeschool, but when the children start regular school, we're going to put them in dad's district. So they gave us primary placement, I guess, so to speak. Some states call it that. California doesn't really refer to it as that, but they gave dad school enrollment in our district, and they had, but they let mom homeschool. So I remember Thomas and I walking out of that courtroom and just feeling completely devastated, like, oh my goodness, we lost, right? Like, this is not what we wanted. We did not want her to be able to homeschool. This also meant we had to take him to her and pick him up from her every single day during our parenting time, because we had week on, week off. That was going to mean a lot of interaction with her, which she and he were not having at the time. They were doing all pickups and drop-offs at daycare and not really seeing each other. So there was just multiple levels on which it was really devastating. But we made it through that year. And then the next year, he started first grade in public school, and the younger child started kindergarten in public school. And then they went in our district. And then we had district for their entire school career through graduation, which means they went to school right across the street from us. We have a K through 12 campus. So it was very, very convenient because they were right next to our home for their entire school career. Now, we weren't really thinking about all those years down the road when we were standing in front of that judge. We were thinking about in that moment that he ruled against Thomas and that his ex-wife was going to be allowed to homeschool the child, which at the time felt to us like a detriment for the child. And I do think that once that child started first grade, we did see a huge jump in his social development. So I think that it was good for him to finally start school in his instance. But would he have made that kind of jump the year before when he was a year younger or whatever? I don't know. We have no way of knowing in retrospect. When you first get these kinds of orders and it hits you and you're upset and you walk out of there and you're upset, I mean, what I tell people is try to stay calm, try to wait, try to go back and look at it again 24 or 48 hours. This whole court process is very emotional. We're already in a really heightened emotional state. And a lot of times in that state, things look a lot worse than what they really are. And I can tell you from having had my own court hearings, a lot of times, I wouldn't sleep the night before. I'd be tossing and turning in and out of sleep. You're stressed out, right? It's coming up, and all those kinds of things. So really just give yourself a day or two of decompression before you come back and look at the orders again and try to see what some of the things that are in there that the judge gave you that might be a positive outcome, particularly over the long haul. I feel like that's something that they really do. I've seen them do that in several situations where it's kind of like it feels like the one person got the win short term, but really over the long haul, when it's really going to have a bigger impact, the other person got a lot more benefit than they realized. I hope that's helpful. If you'd like to learn more about moving your case through the system in child custody and how to navigate all these little pitfalls, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's information on that page on my coaching programs, and you can take a look at those and figure out which one might be a good fit for you. Okay, I'll see you guys next time.